But yeah, the big thing I think was to do with cravings, emotional eating, which is totally understandable at the moment, particularly in a lockdown. I think if you didn't emotional eat or comfort eat before, you possibly have started now. And I think we're all feeling it, myself included. So yeah, this evening we are going to talk about mainly emotional eating and sugar cravings, because really they're kind of the same subject and they're intertwined. So I suppose I'm going to start with what is emotional eating. In a nutshell, it is eating to change the way you feel. So whether that's to comfort or soothe yourself, whether it's to reward yourself, wanting to feel good, or to distract yourself from something that you maybe don't want to do, or something that maybe you don't want to feel. And I think it's important to say that we all emotional eat to a certain extent. Myself included, we all do it. And research says that 75% of our eating behavior is actually rooted and dictated by our emotions, as opposed to, let's say, hunger. And I think that rings true because food is not just fuel. We don't eat just because we're hungry or just to eat to live. Not many people do anyway. And I think food, we associate eating with so many parts of our life. It's a big part of family life. It's a big part of celebrations. It's a big part of even romance at times. So it's very entrenched into our day-to-day life. So probably the best way for me to start in terms of how to know if you're emotional eating and how to deal with it is simply to talk a little bit first about the difference between learning how to differentiate between physical hunger and emotional hunger, because it might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people, when I usually do my live courses and talk about this, have kind of go, oh, actually, I didn't realize how much I was doing it or understand the difference. So there's a little section in my book, Goodbye Sugar, that I'm just going to read you through, and it's basically how to differentiate between physical and emotional hunger. So I'm going to just fly through it. So the differences are, so emotional hunger tends to come on suddenly, whereas physical hunger builds up gradually. You start feeling a tiny bit hungry, then a good bit hungry, and then you're very hungry. Emotional hunger involves craving for specific foods, whereas hunger tends to be a little bit more flexible. So if you have emotional hunger, it tends to be for something very specific. So it might be, chocolate ice cream. It might be for Doritos. It might be for minstrels, jellies, whatever it is, but it's usually quite specific. And that kind of hunger starts in the mouth. It's that kind of, I'd love to actually have that. It starts in the mouth. Emotional hunger usually doesn't stop when you're full. So physical hunger, once your stomach is full, usually will stop if we're just, following our hunger and fullness cues. Whereas emotional hunger doesn't actually stop when you're full, because it wasn't ever really being that hungry. We don't necessarily turn to chocolate because we're hungry. We turn to it because we want it to do something for us. And here's the interesting one as well. Emotional hunger usually ends with feelings of regret, with feelings of guilt, and perhaps even shame. Whereas you would rarely feel that way if you just ate a dinner or a meal. So a little action point might be that the next time you have a desire to eat, just ask yourself, okay, is what I'm experiencing here physical hunger or is it emotional hunger? Okay. So moving on from that, what I'm going to talk to you now is a little bit about triggers for emotional eating. We are all triggered to eat for a variety of different reasons, and we all have different eating behaviors and different styles. However, over the years, I have discovered that there are certainly very, very common triggers. And I'm going to kind of go through what I would consider the most common triggers. And I'd like to see which ones you guys relate to. And if any of you, relate to what I'm saying, leave me a comment, let me know, and see if you're connecting with it. But I do also realize that this particular topic can be a little bit triggering for people in itself. It can kind of bring up some emotions, and there's only so deep that we can go in an Instagram live to kind of go into it a little bit deeper. I would personally prefer to do this type of thing in a closed group setting. So that is probably something that I will do at a later stage. So if you're interested in that, just pop me an email and let me know. So, okay, what are the common triggers for emotional eating, also known as comfort eating? The most common one I would see, I think we can all relate to this one, is stress and tiredness. So many of us use food as a way to cope with the day-to-day stresses of life. And you might start out the day with great intentions. You know, you've had your porridge and fruit in the morning, you made yourself a lovely chicken salad at lunch, you're feeling really good. But as the day progresses, stress increases, you know, and especially at the moment between homeschooling and stress, and so many of us are juggling so many different things. You might get tired, you might get overwhelmed, and you think, you know what, sod this. The tea and the chocolate biscuits come out, and then you think, oh, here, listen, I've kind of messed up now. Just eat what I want for dinner, and then the nighttime snacking can often begin. So sometimes our intentions go out the window when stress and tiredness come in. And obviously, you know, food gives us a little bit of a lift at the time, a little bit of comfort. But unfortunately, that good feeling doesn't last too long. And if we overdo it, or we're continuously using food to manage our emotions, it can have a negative effect. And this is something I suppose I wanted to kind of say at the start as well. You know, we all emotionally eat to a certain extent. And there is nothing wrong with, you know, Karen is saying she totally relates to that. Okay, that's interesting. I think we all do. There's nothing wrong with having a little, you know, piece of cake or a few chocolate biscuits because, you know, you want to kind of cheer yourself up. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're doing it very often and you're consuming a large, you know, you're overindulging, then it can start to have a negative effect on your weight and on your health. And then it actually starts to cause you some emotional pain. So it starts to have negative consequences on you. So the kind of question you have to ask yourself is your eating behavior and is your emotional eating actually having a negative impact on your life? And if you think it is, then maybe it's something to start working on. And I'm kind of a big believer, if you can nail this, I personally think it is actually the key to long-term health and weight management. So an interesting thing, back to that stress and tiredness. So many people would come to me for a consultation and, you know, they would talk about this, you know, 2 stone that they need to lose. And it would become really apparent to me during the consultation that their stress and anxiety levels are really high. That rings a bell for you, Barbara. Yeah, I think, thanks for the comment. So people would say, yeah, I'm so stressed, I'm so tired, it's go, go, go. And I can just see that their lives are so busy, that they're overwhelmed, and they've really gone down to the bottom of their own priority list. And what I've kind of noticed is that stress and tiredness are at the root of the problem in terms of a lot of people neglecting their health and overeating. So then that person, let's say, gains weight and they feel tired and sluggish. So then they look for the solution, which they think is to find a good, healthy diet to lose weight. Whereas they're never really getting to the root problem, because the root problem for their overeating is actually the unmanaged stress and the overwhelm and tiredness that's in their life. So they really need to look at the root problem. And I know that's hard, particularly at the moment. But so Maura is saying she can definitely relate to that as well. Okay, thank you. It's lovely to get some comments because it can be really hard to connect with people in this way. I'm so used to doing these groups live, and it can be really hard to know what people are thinking. So I do appreciate the comments. Thank you. So I just think that if stress, overwhelm and tiredness is an issue for you, and if you think it's driving your eating patterns, then I would really encourage you to take some time and think about ways that you can alleviate at least even a tiny bit your stress levels and your tiredness levels. Someone saying they're always tired, they always turn to sugar. Yeah, it's a really common thing. Like even at the moment myself, I am feeling stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed some days, and I'm feeling very tired some days, and I'm just trying to look, whilst it's limiting at the moment in a lockdown, because we're all juggling so many different things. I did take some time a few days ago and think about, okay, what are the things that I can control? What way can I actually just make my own self-care more of a priority, put myself higher up on my priority list? Because I think a lot of the time, particularly as women, and often, you know, when we're working and mothers, we tend a lot of the time to shove ourselves down the priority list. We're kind of give. So if you take just a little bit of time for yourself, even this week, and think, what are the small ways I can actually try to reduce my stress levels a little bit, and maybe look at trying to delegate a little bit, ask for a little bit of help so that you maybe don't feel so tired and overwhelmed. So just a little something to think about there. Okay, the next common trigger is what I like to call pleasure seeking and distraction. Somebody's saying, oh gosh, yes, they can relate so much as a single mom, working since last March at home, homeschooling an 8-year-old. I know it's so hard to unwind. But I think once you kind of have that awareness, sometimes we eat so automatically, we're not really realizing how much of it is coming from, we're using food as a coping tool. So in terms of pleasure seeking or distracting, a lot of the time we eat just to give ourselves something nice to do, or to distract ourselves maybe perhaps from something that we don't want to do or we don't want to actually feel. So it might be just something as simple as you might be feeling just a little bit bored at the moment. There's nothing really to look forward to with the way things are. You might just be feeling a bit blah with the day-to-day sort of chores and kind of the to-do lists. I feel like that some days. And food is kind of a distraction from that. A lot of people would also say that they may feel dissatisfied with certain, parts of their life. It could be career, it could be a relationship. And a common thing I often hear is maybe that sort of feeling of emptiness, maybe perhaps feeling like something is missing, but you don't know what that thing is. And food is a really quick and easy way to fill you up in the moment. It can really just help to kind of stuff or push down emotions or things that you don't want to feel. And in that moment, it can kind of just fill up that void and make us feel better. But unfortunately, it doesn't, that kind of good feeling that we get from maybe overindulging or comfort eating doesn't last very long. And I think there can be a real fine line between pleasure and pain. So in other words, having a few squares of chocolate in the evening, winding down after a hard day, nothing wrong with that. If you can relax and enjoy and have a few squares of chocolate, perfect. But if, let's say, it turns into 2 bars of chocolate and you're doing this really regularly, chances are it's going to start maybe causing weight gain, and it's going to maybe start feeling quite tired and quite sluggish, and you might start to feel bad about yourself. So then really that pleasure has moved over into pain. So I think that's something to think about as well. Whilst we think food gives us pleasure, yes it does in the moment, but also ultimately too much of it, overdoing anything can end up actually moving over into pain. So does anyone relate to that? And perhaps another thing just to think about too is that right now, because we're so limited in terms of what we can do, we're kind of looking for ways to bring joy and satisfaction kind of into our life. And sometimes food can maybe just, Karina says 100% agrees. Food can maybe just take up maybe too much of a priority, and maybe it can become the biggest source of joy in our life. Perhaps really the only source of joy in our life. And I know that for most of us, and my own family as well, food has become even more important, which is nice in ways to have a bit of ceremony around meal times. But if food is the only source of joy in your life, then maybe it's time to have a little think about what other ways you can bring joy and comfort into your life. What are the ways can you fill your cup and make you feel good? And it might be just simple things like getting out for walks in nature and connecting with people in whatever way we can at the moment. But just have a little think about that, the difference between sort of how too much of something can go from pleasure but to actually end up causing you pain. I can see from here that a lot of you are connecting with that, so that's good. Right, what else did I want to say? Oh yes, before I move on, because I have a sneaky suspicion I'm going to forget about this, before I move on, because the feedback I got from you guys is I got a good few emails talking about cravings and sugar cravings as kind of being a big thing. I have decided to give you guys a little gift. So I have an online program called the 10-day sugar-free plan. It's a kickstart plan, and I have made it free for you guys. So anyone who wants to, anyone who's struggling with sugar cravings, who maybe feels like that their sugar cravings are out of control and they really want to cut down on sugar, it's a really good kickstart plan. It's only 10 days, but it's a really good way, as I say, of just kickstarting you towards healthier eating habits. It helps to reduce the sweet tooth. It helps to kind of give you confidence to realize actually that you don't have to be as reliant on sweet foods. It's not about, never eating sugar ever again. It's not about that. You don't have to go sugar free to get the benefits. It's just about giving you a space to cut back on sugar, reset your taste buds, and see how good you can actually feel when you do cut down on it. So if anyone wants to try it, they can go on to my online program section of my website now, spread the word, and all I would ask you to do is just, if you find it beneficial, just to pop me an email or leave a few comments and let me know if you found it useful. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next, what I would consider common trigger for emotional eating. And that is, again, what I kind of like to call unconscious habits and, you're welcome, and associations. So sometimes it can be less about maybe certain feelings, but more about habits. So it can be certain times of the day. It can be certain times of the week. So for example, the weekend can trigger you to overeat. It can be certain places or certain people that you associate. Maybe you meet certain people, or used to meet certain people. Every time you eat them, it's just you have coffee and you have scones, and we kind of just do it unconsciously because that's just a habit we've fallen into. But probably the biggest kind of unconscious habit I think that we have is, I think for a lot of people, is evening time. It seems to be a time in the evening where we are just in that habit and we associate sitting down. You've had a hard day in work, you may have had a tough day with kids, you might have just got them to, somebody else says weekends are hard. I know, it's that kind of reward thing. So at the weekend or at the end of the day, you're sitting down in front of the TV and you want to give yourself something. You've given all day probably, and it's wanting to kind of give yourself something. But I think that a lot of the time we this kind of snacking that we do at night is almost unconscious. It's almost automatic. It's like, it's just what we do when we watch TV. And sometimes just even having like a little bit, just stopping for a moment and kind of saying, do I really need this? Like, could I actually just relax and unwind and enjoy watching this program on Netflix? Do I need to be kind of snacking with it? It can just be a very kind of automatic thing. And I think that's where kind of eating more mindfully is so important as well, because when we're eating in front of screens, scrolling on our phone, watching TV, we're far less aware of how much we're eating, what we're eating, and we're far less satisfied as well. So we have this kind of tendency to just continue to eat and eat and eat without really acknowledging or enjoying what we're having. So if, for example, you find that a big trigger for you is just purely the evening time and sitting in front of the TV, something that's useful to do is actually just to, if you really want to break that cycle, even for a few days, just change up the routine. Don't watch TV downstairs in the living room beside the kitchen. Maybe go upstairs and watch something on Netflix on an iPad, or better still, maybe read, or go for a walk, or have a bath, just to break up the routine so you don't have that kind of constant association. Would anyone say that that's a trigger for them? I'd be interested to know. Just certain days of the week or certain people or certain situations trigger you? Yes, says Geraldine. Okay. It's interesting. So, okay, a lot of people are saying the weekends. Yeah, I can relate to that too as well. It's just that kind of reward thing. And listen, again, there's nothing wrong with, having a dessert at the weekends and, maybe getting a takeaway and having a few glasses of wine. I do all of those things myself. But I suppose the question is it stopping you from looking and feeling, more importantly, the way you want to feel? Is it holding you back from your health goals? A lot of people are saying it's for tiredness, looking for energy, yeah. And something to the cup of tea. Yeah, that came up before, actually. We were talking a little bit about maybe cutting down on tea and coffee can help you cut down on the sugar, on the sweet treats. Yes, sitting down in the evening watching TV. Yeah, so try that maybe even this week, just switching up the evening time routine if that is a trigger for you. Okay, so in terms of, you possibly related to some, if not all, of those triggers. So what I would suggest that you do, and this is kind of a little action point for this week, is to maybe just have a little think about which trigger you think comes up the most often for you. Which one triggers you the most? And then just start giving a little bit of your attention and awareness to that particular trigger. So for example, let's just say tiredness. A good few of you kind of mentioned tiredness. Let's say kind of tiredness is a big one for you. And, you know, come tomorrow afternoon, you're feeling really tired and overwhelmed and you want to reach for the tea or coffee and the chocolate biscuits. Just take a moment to stop. Instead of that kind of automatic thing that we do of just, you know, automatically reaching for whatever we want, just take a moment and check in with yourself and just kind of ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling? What's going on with me? Try and label the feeling. You know, is it that I'm feeling overwhelmed? Is it that I'm feeling frustrated? Is it that I'm feeling stressed or tired? And then kind of ask yourself, okay, what do I really need? I want to have the tea and the chocolate biscuits, but what is it that I actually really need? What could make me feel better in this moment, but still help me actually reach my health goals? And maybe that means that it's something as simple as lying down for 10 minutes. I find sometimes for me, it's just tiredness. I just need to lie down and get some space for 10 minutes. And after I get that, I feel much better able to get on with the rest of my day. Maybe it's just a 10-minute meditation if that's all you have. Like let's say the Headspace app that they do 10 minutes motivation and meditation. If you have time or the space, going for a quick walk. Just trying other little coping tools and not automatically reaching for food as a coping tool to make yourself feel better. So that's what I would encourage you to do over the next little while. Pick a trigger that you think is the one that comes up most often for you and try to look at alternative coping mechanisms. And you might find that really, you know, okay, sometimes tea and chocolate biscuits is all that will do, and that's fine. But it doesn't have to be every time. That it doesn't have to be the only tool in your box. What else do I want to say to you on this? Yeah, they would be the main kind of triggers that I think are kind of the big issues. What else did I want to say? There was something else I wanted to mention. I can't remember what it was. That's going out of my head. Which ones, I'd be interested to know, which ones do you guys think are the bigger ones? That 10-day sugar-free plan, a lot of you kind of were asking me kind of for little tips and tricks of how to deal with cravings. What's interesting about the 10-day sugar-free plan is you kind of get, it's not a strict eating plan to follow. It's actually very flexible. It gives you a list of foods allowed and it gives you meal suggestions and it gives you recipes, but there is flexibility in it. And the idea is that for 10 days, you basically have no sugary foods. And the idea with that is that from a physical perspective, it helps to balance out your blood sugar and sort of reset your taste buds and actually just really, really curb your physical cravings for sugar. Because, you know, we're talking about emotions now, but also there's the physical side of things. When you get into the habit of consuming large amounts of sugar and often with caffeine, what can happen is you kind of go on to that vicious cycle where you're tired and you use a bit of sugar and caffeine to kind of perk yourself up, and it does momentarily, but then it drops back down again. Your blood sugar level drops and then your body is physically craving sugar and caffeine to perk yourself back up. So you're just caught in that constant roller coaster. And I know a lot of people are stuck on that roller coaster. Does anyone relate to that kind of sugar caffeine roller coaster? And it can be really hard to get off. And that is where I think that 10-day sugar detox can be really good to just help you to wipe the slate clean, get off that roller coaster, and help you kind of start from scratch. So it addresses the physical side of things, but then also I do, there's 10 videos. So there's a video that corresponds with each day. You can view them all in one go if you wanted to. definitely, says Barbara. Okay. Or I really would prefer, actually, the way I would intend you to do is to actually watch each video on each day. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And each video addresses a different type of issue. So I talk about sort of the, the physical kind of detox symptoms, maybe supplements that you can take. That would be one of my biggest problems, cut down on caffeine, and found that helped. Okay, interesting. So you found that the caffeine helped you cut down on sugar, is that what you mean? It's possibly, I'd say. But also each video deals also with the emotional side of things as well. So that kind of the emotional come down that can happen when you cut down on sugar, and how to deal with cravings and kind of motivation. Yes, says Carmen. Okay. So as I say, it's not about not eating sugary foods at all, and that's not even what the book is about. It's really about trying to get back in control over your sugar cravings, so that they're not controlling you, that you can get back to a balanced style of eating, so that if you want to have that piece of cake, or you want to have the dessert, or you want to have a few squares of chocolate in the evening, that's fine, but that it doesn't move over into an area where you feel out of control. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing with sugar. There are definitely people who can eat small amounts of sweet foods and they can leave it at that. And then there are definitely people who find that once they start eating sugary foods, it's a slippery slope, that they can't just have a few squares of chocolate, that it ends up being, they end up binge eating on chocolate and sweets. So if that's you, then I would say definitely the 10-day sugar-free plan, or even the book, the plan that's in the book can be really, really useful as a great kind of kickstart. And then my other plan is the Perfect Balance plan, which is basically a low GI style of eating. It's more of a kind of a lower sugar style of eating, and that's more kind of the moderate eating kind of plan for life. It's actually my favorite plan, I have to say. And that one at the moment for a short period of time is going to be 50%. So it's just a little gesture from me to you as a little bit of COVID support, because I think that we could all do with a little bit of help at the moment, because it is extra challenging staying on track with health eating habits. Maura says it's all or nothing with sugary foods for me. Yeah. And then, so if that's you, then some people are better off just eliminating sugary foods out of their diet altogether, because they just find that once they start, they can't stop. However, though, I have seen people reform from that if they take a break from sugar, like they do like a short kind of detox, maybe for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they bring it in very, very slowly, and they address the emotional side of things, that then they eventually can kind of come back into balance. The other topic that you guys wanted me to talk about was hormone balance. I don't think we're going to have time to chat about it. Barbara says she can relate to Maura. Yeah, it really is. The hormone balance, I'm not going to have time to kind of get into that this evening. It is a topic that I know you guys are really interested in, and I will cover it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it as an Instagram live next Tuesday. I'm going to have a little think about the best way to cover it. I may do like a pre-recorded video or a blog, and then I'm going to let you know, basically. I will notify you guys when I have posted up something about hormone balance, because I know that a lot of you said that was kind of an issue and something you wanted me to talk about. Stress is a big factor for cravings, says Maura. Yeah, I agree. If you would like, as I say, I'm thinking of doing kind of an online group where it's a closed group, so it's a more kind of a private setting, mainly kind of focused on, yes, I find myself eating to compensate for exhaustion and stress of work. Okay, so that's a really good example then, Maria, of you needing to look at the root causes and how, even in very small ways, can you alleviate the stress, and how can you fill your cup without having to always use food as a coping tool, because it's such a vicious cycle and it's a really hard one to get off, and I can totally relate. But just even maybe give some time this week to thinking about, okay, is there even one way I could reduce my stress? Is there even one thing that might make me feel less tired? And that just might mean, let's say, for example, in the afternoon, if you get an afternoon slump, maybe instead of going for the tea and chocolate biscuits, maybe actually having a nutritionally balanced snack. So maybe having a little handful of cashew nuts and a little piece of fruit. See how that makes you feel. It's probably going to give you much more long-lasting energy and kind of mood-boosting properties as well. And you feel good that you've made a good choice. So sometimes it doesn't have to be huge, big, radical changes that actually make a difference. Sometimes it's little, small changes that can actually add up to make a difference. And you're right, we have to try to get to the root cause of being stressed at the moment as well. Yeah. And I think, listen, most of us are stressed at the moment. Although interesting though, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were kind of saying that, like, in many ways, I think there are lots of people who have benefited from lockdown life, in the sense that it's giving them time to kind of reset, to think. A lot of people maybe would have been on the go a lot, maybe in the car a lot, in offices, and now they have a little bit more time at home, so they're in a position to actually cook from scratch more, and maybe give a little bit more thought to their meals and prioritize their eating as well. So if you look at it from a positive point of view, in a way, COVID, because we're at home more, we can give a little bit more time to meal planning and cooking, I think, anyway. We all have to stop. Maybe it's time to stop baking the banana bread. Okay, on that note, guys, I'm going to leave it. If you would like to be if you'd like to know when I'm going to do, let's say, an online course, probably kind of a closed group one. Thanks, yes, going to try this working in hospital, so challenging to get breaks. Yeah, I can totally understand that. I've worked with many nurses, and it really can be really challenging in that regard. You need just little small healthy snacks that you can kind of snack on. Great positivity, thank you. Thank you for all the lovely comments, it means a lot to me. And certainly, you know, I will post up this recorded video. But what I was saying was, if you would like to know about upcoming courses, online courses, some kind of closed groups, do let me know. Send me an email to elsajonesnutrition@gmail.com. I'll put you on my list, and I will notify you the next time I do, let's say, an online course, or I do, let's say, a weight loss group, where we can maybe in a closed group get a little bit kind of deeper, and we can really kind of, you know, support each other as well. Thank you for all the lovely comments. Yes, email me. Let me know if you've benefited from any of these live sessions. Let me know if there's any topics or questions that you would like me to deal with in the future. I may not do them as Instagram lives, or I might even just do them as pre-recorded videos, but I will, if there's topics that come up again and I feel people really need help and they're benefiting, I will continue to kind of post up videos and that kind of thing. Thanks so much, Elsa. Always worth listening to. Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me, guys. So I appreciate it. And I am going to look after my own self-care right now, and I'm going to let you guys go, get into my PJs, and try and just de-stress and decompress from a long day, and have hopefully a good night's sleep. So I shall see you guys soon.